I am
try
so
it. Yeah.
happy that I am not the half-assed repair guy on this one.
Would you take them out, Patrick?
I would totally break out the individual ones. And yeah, it's going to suck, but you know, what else are you going to do? Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is mediocre editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by digital brand manager Rob Wadsack.
Good morning.
Kiley Jacques, design editor.
Hello.
And Jeff Rose, producer.
Howdy.
Please email us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. How you guys been?
Good. Doing all right.
It's kind of stayed here this morning. I'm a little worried. Are you guys going to boost your energy level, or am I going to have to drag you along with me?
I'm right with you.
You were already at the gym this morning, eh?
Yeah, I've been busy already. I've done a lot. I'm awake.
And that was your first time back into your health regimen, right?
Yeah, yesterday was. So
how'd it go?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. I think they did a really nice job trying to make everybody feel safe and taking care of the obvious. And I was never closer than 6 feet to anybody. So they've taken a lot of precautions.
I think not being closer to 6 feet to anybody would be my ideal scenario for the rest of my life.
Me too. I've had the very thought. Works for
Rob,
me.
what have you been doing?
What have I been doing? Oh, let's see. Well, I did phase 2 of the kayak management system. And your first phase was the truck rack that went in the bed of my truck that we talked about a few weeks ago. But now I was like, where the heck am I going to store these things? These really nice boats. I don't want to leave them outside and get them full of bugs and leaves. So the problem is my shed is only 9 feet wide and my boats are 10 feet long. So I decided to build a rack.
You need a boat bump out.
Well, I thought of that, except if I did the boat bump out, it would be in my neighbor's yard. So I figured they would probably protest. But I ended up just building a diagonal one instead. I just screwed some 2x4s to the rafters and the floor, and I had this old shelving system that had these heavy-duty metal arms on it that I just screwed to the 2x4s. And I did that rather than screwing plywood right to the 2x4s so that because I didn't know how high I wanted them. And that way they're just adjustable. And same kind of thing, plywood cradles, pipe insulation. And, you know, instead of some elaborate construction project, it took me like an hour to do it. And now I have a nice, tidy place to keep my boats.
That's
You're
the
so
best
attached to
possible
your
construction
kayaks
project.
Yeah, that's cool. You're so attached to your boats now, Rob. I love it. It's awesome. You guys have been on the water a lot.
You know, it's funny. We've had canoes and kayaks in the past, and my neighbor has a big boat rack down by the water, and like you can't even tell what color the boats are because they're just covered in like tree sap and spider webs. So I was like,
That's
you know
so
what?
Common.
My new boats, I want to keep them nice.
How often do you go out, Rob?
I've been going paddling. I say an average about once a week. I'd like to get up to more than that this summer, but.
Hey, I wanted to tell you guys about an investment I made, a work-related investment.
Lay it on me, sister.
Just you're talking about that made me think of it. I was kind of inspired by you cutting windows into your barn and Jeff setting himself up with some air conditioning so he'll be comfortable. So I decided to figure out what would make me more comfortable, and I bought a treadmill pad that goes under my standing desk so I can be walking while I work.
Wow.
It's the wave of the future.
You have got to take some video of that and put it up on the podcast page because everybody's going to want to see that. I'm not even sure I can imagine what that's like.
It's just a walking pad. It's like a slow, you don't walk very fast. I've had one in the past. I just got a basic model.
So does it roll like a treadmill?
Yeah, it's a treadmill. It's a rolling pad. It's electric.
So it's basically a mini treadmill without the upright portion.
Exactly. So you're standing at your desk, walking.
That sounds dangerous.
It's not. You go very slow. But you can put 5 miles in a day. I've done that. Anyway, I thought you might get a kick out of it. It's a big purchase.
How about you, Jeff? Are you done painting?
Oh, I've never done painting.
Right?
Yeah, especially, working on a ladder is like, you climb the ladder, you do 4 feet, you climb down the ladder.
It's tiring.
I mean, is the window done though?
Oh yeah, the window's done. Finish the fascia and soffit on that wall, and that was, that's what took some time of up and down the ladder.
How high was that at the eave?
It's probably like 30 feet.
Oof. God, that's high.
It's kind of, reach over your head and just, okay, I hope I got it on there.
Are your
Paint the
shins
shingle.
Whatever.
Are your shins all bruised from leaning into the ladder?
Oh yeah.
Not so much. No, I think I'm pretty comfortable on ladders generally.
And just moving a ladder that's
oh yeah,
that's that tall is really hard.
Oh yeah, and the fiberglass ladder is really
heavy.
And it's
heavy.
fiberglass.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
Yeah.
And it's bouncy.
Do you let it down? Do you just, shorten it before you move it, or do you just keep it in the same position?
I mean, because I've just been moving it a couple of feet, I've been keeping it up. So, and it's got the brace, so it's a 4-foot span to stabilize it.
Oh, okay.
I think fiberglass ladders are great for their sturdiness and the confidence they inspire up there because of their strength. But oh my God, they're so heavy. And especially when the thing is stretched to, 20 some feet, like that's really hard.
When Brian moved south, he gave me his. I had to strap it to the roof of my Fiesta to drive it from his house to my house. That was an adventure.
This ladders seemed like another thing, like we were talking about sawhorses recently, about how there's not one that has all the perfect characteristics. It's either light and easy to move and bouncy and electrically conductive, or it's heavy. And when are they going to start coming out with like the carbon fiber ladders?
Yeah, right.
I think if you could make that at all affordable, people would snatch them up. And my guess is that utility companies would totally want those because I'm sure they have a lot of workman's comp claims from people who are moving ladders who get hurt, right?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
It's a silent killer, the ladder.
Even just standing on a ladder, like you don't realize if you don't have good, solid boots on how much that wears on you over time,
Especially when the rungs are round instead of flat on one side, like that is the absolute worst.
Yep.
I want to tell you guys, we have a new employee here at the homestead.
Liam.
And it's a welcome addition to the labor pool, I got to say. So Liam has been for the last few years going to teen adventure camp every summer, and the idea is that these young people go somewhere every day, adventure parks, amusement parks, paintball, all these fun activities, right? And unfortunately, the town has canceled all the camps, and so we're going to take that money that we would have spent, which is between $200 and $300 a week, and we're employing Liam 20 hours a week to do awful things, basically.
What's he done so far?
So he dug out about 100 feet of privet. That was the first task. That took him a couple days. And I swear to God, the kid works. I set him up so I could keep an eye on him to make sure he wasn't leaning on the shovel. And he's been really working hard. Today he's I think I told you about my battle with the mugwort. So like I cut all this stuff down with the electric hedge trimmer, and then I've been mowing it with the lawnmower. And so there's like all these sticks that are all over the ground, and they're really tough on the mower blade. So I'm having him rake all that stuff up today. And he told me that was even worse than digging out the privet, which I find hard to believe, but he does.
Well, is he removing the roots of it?
Of the privet?
No, of the grass, the tough.
No. Okay. So we're just going to try and keep mowing it to make it peter out. And part of the area, Carol has planted a pumpkin patch. She made raised beds and dug out all the mugwort, and those are just getting established now. She had to make cages to keep the deer from eating them, right? So that was part of the effort. But I'll put pictures of all that stuff up on the podcast page. I love having an employee. It's fantastic.
Do you call it that?
I made a timesheet for him. I figured if I don't take this seriously, he's not either. So we got a timesheet. We got the,
That's awesome.
It's great.
I'd love to hear some feedback from our listeners on the varying degrees of success people have had with this type of situation. Because, it's right around Father's Day, we were asking people for pictures of them working with their kids. And I think since a lot of people are home now, they have more opportunity to do projects with them. And we've had some awesome photos of people having a good time doing that and teaching their kids some skills.
That's
and
great.
I had my daughter helping me with a drywall patch the other day, and it was like 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. Dad,
she's a teenage girl.
Dad, I can figure this out by myself. Stop showing me how to do it.
I'm forever like balancing the top-down approach versus letting him be self-directed, right? And I think there's a balance. You have to let people succeed and fail on their own many times, but I don't want him to waste his effort and time, so I'm trying to be good about butting out, but I can't help myself sometimes. I have to go out there and tell him that, picking up individual sticks is not as efficient as using a rake, for example. But, it's cool. So I think today he's going to do some tying up of our asparagus patch in addition to the brutal manual labor. So we're trying to balance the horrible things with some things that aren't too bad, but...
Well, both of your kids are lucky to have such good role models, because I'm sure you're out there doing things too.
That's what I tell Liam all the time. He's very lucky to have me.
He's used to seeing you and Carol do stuff.
So we got some great feedback as always, and I thank all of our listeners who write into the show with questions and responses to our dubious advice. So thank you very much, all of you. So we heard from Mike in Michigan in our discussion of fixing squeaky floors. Patrick, the screw you were trying to think of was called Squeak No More. It's got like 10 E's, I swear to God.
I looked it up. I thought he was joking, but it really is called that.
What makes them unique is 2 different types of threads on the screw. That being said, when I redid my hardwood floor, I spent days drawing down the flooring to the floor joist and identifying every squeak and getting rid of them with Squeak No More screws. I used 100 screws for about 550 square feet of flooring. That was about 2 years ago. I'm sad to say the floor now squeaks where I didn't use the screws. Looking back, I should have used them on the entire floor in a pattern after fixing the problem areas. Oh, well. Well, Mike, that apparently there's more than one brand, right? We found another kind that was similar.
What's that one?
I don't know. We also heard from Rick. He goes, I noticed you played a bit of audio for place name pronunciation. What about a bit of suitable music? I was listening to a favorite today, Colin Linden, and thought he must have dealt with an old house at some point, leading to this song, Knob and Tube, from his album Rich in Love. So I took a listen to Knob and Tube. I don't know if you guys did.
I did.
I'd play it on the show. It's a little blue.
I thought it had a good sound to it. I liked it.
I don't think it's really about wiring. Let's just say that. He goes on to say, my house in Guelph, Ontario was moved to its site in 1930, and when I got it, it had all knob and tube wiring fed by a panel of 2 15-amp screw-in fuses in a ceramic block. It's now 200 amps, but it's amazing the folks had lived with 2 15-amp circuits for 50 years. Anyways, it's relatively brief. Maybe for next time you could get a question on knob and tubery, and I'm sure he's only talking about wiring. The writer of the song is a 1/3 of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, a well-established producer. He worked on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, as I remember, which if you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but it's got a fantastic bluegrass soundtrack that is just super fun to listen to.
I like it too.
So my dad didn't have knob and tube wiring anymore in his house when I was growing up, but he still did have the 15-amp fuses that he had to change, and I remember that being a pain in the butt on a regular basis.
Yeah, so in my parents' house growing up, there was what started out to be what looked like 4 20-amp circuits, and then there was like a sub panel, and then a sub panel on the sub panel, and then the sub panel on the sub panel, and then there was like a dozen extension cords plugged into the sub panels below, and eventually, when I got to be somewhat skilled in electrical wiring, as I replaced that for them, but And then a lot of the habitat houses, not a lot, a handful of them, like this guy was saying, you'd find the panel was two 15-amp circuits. And what I found interesting is it was often a wooden box somewhere hidden in a closet. And it just seemed like so impossibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And of course, throughout the decades, houses got more and more electric stuff. And I'm sure the circuits were really overloaded. But, people don't want to spend money on that stuff, assuming they can turn on the lights, right?
Yeah. I feel like I've talked to a lot of architects and, that wind up doing big remodels. And when they come across it, is it code to get rid of that now? If you come across it, they always get rid of it. But
I mean, I would think that pretty much with any remodeling project, it probably depends on how big the project is. That's usually the determining factor on whether you need to bring stuff up to code.
Okay.
So
I kind of think it's up to the electrician's individual reliability. Many of them will say, yeah, we can't have this because it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure other ones don't want to deal with it because you're climbing and fishing wires through a sweltering attic and climbing through insulation full of mouse poop, So I think it just depends on their own ethics, whether they, will sign off on it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're adding more load to the system, they're going to make you you change it.
I put a 100-amp service in the barn with it was 8 or 12 circuits, and that was the biggest mistake. I am already maxed out in here, and if I ever want to add machinery, a table saw or whatever, I am not going to be able to without adding a sub panel, and that is really just dumb. I should have put a lot more circuits in because it's so inexpensive when you're doing it. You're talking $50 or $60 to double the size of the panel, and God, that was a dumb thing. So don't do that, people.
Is that because you're set up to work at home now that you're using, or is it just that for your equipment that you didn't have enough?
So, Kiley, I think the short answer is so you need a panel right away for temporary power.
Mm-hmm.
And, Andy Engel later taught me these, you should have all the circuits and then buy the panel. You know what I mean? Rough in the cables and then buy a panel to match.
Okay.
And I bought what I imagined was a big enough panel and have several circuits left over, but I just underestimated how many I would need. You need 3 or 4 small appliance circuits, 20-amp circuits. You need a couple lighting circuits if you want to have heat. So after I didn't plan on adding resistance electric heat, but then I decided that I wanted a way to heat the barn if I had to that way, and I had to add that, and those take up a pair of spaces, each one of them, and I think I added 3 of those, so all of a sudden that's 6 circuits.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about that the average appliance in a house is fine on a 15-amp circuit, but if you're starting to get into heating systems, heavy equipment, especially if you're talking about a workshop, anything that's got a bigger motor in it, a 220-volt motor in it is going to need need more capacity than you're going to use for your corded drill or circular saw.
I don't think I'm ever going to use 100 amps, right? That's not the problem. It's just the number of spaces in the panel, right? I could have bought a 100-amp panel with a bunch of additional circuits and I'd have been fine, so don't make that mistake. How big is your panel in your new panel, Rob, in your house?
I didn't up the size. It was a 200-amp service for the house.
But I bet it has a ton of circuits in it, right?
Yes, it's packed.
Yeah. So in episode 253, John asked for more code information, and I fully embraced that. So as luck would have it, we heard from John, who's from Colorado, but he spent some time living in New Zealand. And here's what he wrote about their energy codes, which I thought was pretty interesting. Hello all, I've been meaning to write in about the homes in New Zealand for some time. I'm not a building professional, but I am interested in the process. While living in New Zealand, I dove into building science, given the poor state of their housing stock and my desire to understand what is important in housing. The climate in New Zealand is more subarctic than subtropical, as the south end of the South Island is about 1,700 miles to the Antarctic landmass. The north end of the island can be warm, but I lived closer to the southern end. There are 3 climate zones, the coldest being in the central mountains of the South Island. I lived in Dunedin, which is on the water. The warmest it would really get in the summer was 80 degrees, and usually the coldest in the winter was about 25. But the humidity, since I normally live in Colorado, the humidity changed everything about those temperatures. 25 degrees in Colorado when it's sunny is shirt, sleeves, and shorts weather, but not in Dunedin. I've included a photo that I took that demonstrates what the Kiwis are working with. If you can see it, the wall cavities are not insulated, and when they made this repair, they never bothered stuffing insulation either. They just closed up the wall. Everything is expensive in New Zealand. The housing stock is very old, and the people are reluctant to spend any money on improving their houses to the detriment of their health. The rates of asthma are incredible. And so he put in what New Zealand is calling the healthy home standard, and this applies to rental properties. And these are the things that are going to be in place by July of 2024. He says heating. Rental homes must have fixed heating devices in living rooms, which can warm the rooms to at least 18 degrees Celsius. Some heating devices are inefficient, unaffordable, or unhealthy, and they will not meet the healthy heating building standards. Insulation. Rental homes must have ceiling and underfloor insulation, which either meets the 2008 building code or is at least 120 millimeters thick. Rental homes must have the right size extractor fans in kitchens and bathrooms and opening windows in the living room, dining room, kitchen, and bedrooms. Rental homes must have efficient drainage and guttering, downspouts, and drains. If a rental home has an enclosed subfloor, it must have a ground moisture barrier if it's possible to install one. Draught stopping. So this is spelled like draught beer, D-A-U-G-H-T. It's like drought stopping. Rental homes must have no unnecessary gaps or holes in walls, ceiling, windows, floors, and doors that cause noticeable droughts. All unused chimneys and fireplaces must be blocked. Under the current requirements of the Residential Tenancies Act, landlords must ensure that their rental properties have the right ceiling and underfloor insulation by July 1 of 2019. That's right, only for the last year has insulation under the floor been required. Typically, only one room or hallway would have a heater, and the other rooms would just be cold. You're supposed to use a hot water bottle to get the bed ready at night. He says, I don't miss the cold, wet sheets at all. I would come home from work in January, which is the middle of summer, mind you, and my wife would have a hat and puffy jacket on. It would be about 60 inside the house. That's just hilarious. Some of the poor housing stock is a result of leaky homes syndrome that swept New Zealand in the 90s. This was a result of poor flashing and attention to detail. Other issues are that electricity is very expensive. It's between 25 and 44 cents a kilowatt hour. So I think our electricity is expensive here in Connecticut, and it's about 22 cents a kilowatt hour. So this is double.
Insane. Yeah.
He says over 80% of the electricity is renewable, though, and so many things are imported, and the market is so small that items are really expensive. When I was living in Dunedin, the family that I knew built the first passive house in New Zealand. Imagine the cost of German triple pane windows in the U.S. and then multiply it by 3 or 4 and then convert it to the Pacific peso. The Kiwi dollar is about 65% of the U.S. dollar. Oh, my God.
That's insane.
Well, that's cool.
That was some good info.
Yeah, it's funny. Those codes are like, all of the drafts, all the cracks have to be filled that seem necessary. or like, install a moisture barrier if it's possible.
If you can.
That's funny.
I can't believe how expensive their electricity is. Wow.
Boy.
Yeah. Yep.
No wonder people are cold.
I'd rather be cold than pay that.
Imagine how many puffy coats you could buy. Boy, and this comes from Mark. Mark says, howdy casters. In episode 253 Lightning Round, a person in Tucson asked about using spray foam on the underside of a metal roof. Back in the 90s, I sprayed the entire inside of a metal building in Colorado. It worked great for air sealing and insulation. It also made the walls much more rigid. Metal liner panel was added to the interior for fire protection, and code required foam on the ceiling to be covered with a fire barrier too. When we decided to sell the property 20 years later, the sun had badly faded the paint on the metal roof, probably due to the excess heat created by the spray foam. I'd be much more concerned about this than condensation in Tucson. We determined that there is no easy way to remove metal roofing glued to the purlins with spray foam. The only viable option was to add a second layer of metal roofing on hat channels over the original roof. Based on that experience, I would never use spray foam under a metal roof without some kind of separation layer. The standard vinyl-covered roll insulation made for metal buildings seems like a better choice. Okay, so I think it's a big jump, Mark, to assume that the fading was caused by excess heat. I just think a metal building with a low slope roof in Colorado the paint's gonna fade.
No matter. Mm-hmm.
And like metal roofing and metal coil stock that they make metal buildings from, like the lesser expensive versions have cheaper paint, and the cheaper paint fades more readily than the more expensive ones. And if you're doing a huge building, you know, it adds up to a lot of money. So people just buy the cheapest stuff that they can possibly. So I don't know if I would assume that it was the insulation that caused the paint to fade. And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that it's going to fade after 20 years, right?
Mm. But I mean, he does make a good point about any kind of spray foam installation, is that you do have to expect that it's going to be obviously harder to dismantle in the future if you do have to make any repairs.
How do you go about that? How do you start ripping away? I can't quite picture that.
You hire your teenage son for $12 an hour,
and you give him a hoe and.
I was going to say, what kind of tool do you use to get? Just
I don't
rip
know.
it apart?
I think I would start with a hoe, and then maybe use some putty knives and some pry bars.
I think I would start with a Molotov cocktail is what I would start with.
Good one.
So anyway, he says, in summary, insulating the roof of a shipping container with spray foam to prevent condensation and improve its airtightness is a great idea. Insulating the roof of a metal building with spray foam could be a very bad idea if you ever have to replace the roof. Well, I don't doubt that, but the insulation that he's talking about, which I've heard metal building folks call it sag and bag insulation, and it's fiberglass in a plastic layer, and it's draped over the purlin so the metal squishes it, and it just doesn't work very well.
Yeah, if you go into like a lot of gyms or any other retail establishments that are done in metal roofed buildings or metal wall buildings, you see that stuff, and it just looks like a big padded wall, right?
It looks like a diaper.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen that.
And in these buildings, like, they make them comfortable with just tons of heating and cooling, right? They just have enormous systems to make them work because they're just so poorly insulated and air sealed. They just have to just throw tons of conditioned air, to keep people from dying in there. Oh my goodness! Wow, that is quite
it's a lot of feedback.
Go ahead. Yeah, good stuff. Oh, should we get to a question here?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this comes from, I'm sorry, I forgot to put this on the script here. Anyway, he says, hello, I love hearing your podcast, and I'm a frequent rewinder. My query may be something you've talked about in the past, but I haven't heard it. I have a customer who hired me to install a gliding door in an opening of her home. After the third set of specifications, I told my salesman that the homeowner was going to paint the door. My salesman suggested a pre-finished interior option. I told him she'd like painted wood on the inside, and he steered me to this option. When it arrived, it said vinyl clad on the packaging, and my customer, an 88-year-old woman, not kidding, was appalled. I spent 80 minutes on the phone with Anderson customer service, finally to be told by the specialist that the interior and exterior are vinyl clad. My salesman tells me that he's being told the Flexicron finish is paint. I found an online reference to a Fine Homebuilding discussion forum dated April 12, 2006, where a person called Sledgehammer writes that Flexicron is paint. My main issue is that this Flexicron doesn't act like paint, and I think most anyone who knows materials would say it's PVC. Is it really paint? Please take a look at this page that my first Anderson customer service agent sent to me. By the way, PPG says that Flexicron is an exterior finish.
Yeah. It's not a paint, right? It's a fluoropolymer urethane.
Yes.
And I guess the hype of it is that colors do, I think you can paint it. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting that, but it says It provides superior color fastness and gloss retention on exterior fiberglass, aluminum, and other substrates.
So fluoropolymers are related to what I was talking about with metal buildings. So the best coil stock has a fluoropolymer paint, and they have the best fade resistance. They're very durable. And it's commonly on the cladding of, middle of the road, patio doors and windows. And I happen to know that Anderson, they're huge fans of vinyl cladding because it's durable, it's inexpensive, and it's water impervious, right? And you can heat form it so it can be much more watertight than aluminum cladding. Aluminum cladding are made from extrusions that have to be sealed on the corners, and it doesn't often work long term. But this is the vinyl finish is often on the sash of the casement windows and the inexpensive and middle tier patio doors. The Frenchwood series, and he told me that this was supposed to be a Frenchwood door, are supposed to have like wood panels on the inside put over the material to make it wood. And my guess is somehow signals got crossed, and this had the vinyl cladding all over it. So I don't know of a good way to fix this. He said his dealer has been very helpful and is getting him the wood panels to fix this problem. But he's going to be on the hook for making this lady happy, which is unfortunate. So I don't know that there's really an answer to this except to say that you got to really talk to your window dealer when you're ordering stuff and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And, I think it's best to send your client in to work with your window or door dealer and get them to pick the thing. So if it's not what they want, they're on the hook for it, not you.
I can't quite picture that door that she got.
So my guess is, and I should have asked him for a photograph, but like I said, the door panels are made of this vinyl material because the exterior has to be protected with it, and it's easier from a manufacturing standpoint to put it over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is it paint? I want to know.
So I'm not sure. So Flexicron is a paint.
It is,
but I'm not sure this is Flexicron. I think it's vinyl cladding. Hey, folks, if you're familiar with this more than we are who are listening, I'd be grateful if you'd weigh in, especially if we have any window and door dealers out there who have had this problem. That would be interesting to hear how you resolved it and, what series of – I haven't sold Anderson products for a long time, so I'm not sure if they're the same as I remember, but, what is this door that she got that she's unhappy with?
Yeah, and I have to make one comment to your point earlier, though, Patrick. It's like there's sort of pros and cons to having the customer going directly to the suppliers too, because I know a lot of contractors I've worked with over the years. That they'll specify what they're going to install in a house, and then whether it be hardware or cabinets or whatever, and then the homeowners will be like, oh, well, I can get a deal on this stuff over here, and then they'll provide you with something that's either not up to the standards or not easy to install, and then you're on the hook for extra labor.
I agree, Rob. That is, that is a risk too. And maybe you have a conversation with your window and door dealer before you send your customer in there, and tell them that, like, I only install these things, so sell them one of these, just so you don't have that problem. I agree. That could be a potential snafu.
And I think, one of the best ways to avoid any of these types of situations is just every communication is documented. That's why, email or written invoices or whatever it is should be, kept for every single one of these types of orders. So.
Window and door companies, all this stuff is done with software now. And, you print out a quote with the exact thing and all the specs and all the options, and, you have your client sign off on that. And then you have some recourse, right? Like, hey, and if you weren't sure what you were buying, we could have had a conversation at that time, and then I could have sent you down or taken you down to the showroom and show you exactly what you're getting. Mm-hmm. That's good. And this is an expensive problem to have, right? Even the ordinary patio doors now are thousands of dollars. So I wouldn't want to have to deal with this. So this question comes from John. This is like the John episode. Hey there, I'm a big fan of the show and the magazine, but I felt a bit unsure about writing in since the other writers tend to be so eloquent. But I'll give it a shot anyway. Last year, I moved into an old 1860 townhouse in Over the Rhine, Ohio, which is near Cincinnati, apparently, with wood framing over a stone foundation. The wood structure is remarkably solid with no signs of rot or bug infestation in any of the joists or studs. I also discovered there's little to no insulation, so I think the airflow has probably helped keep the wood dry and rot-free. I'd like to look into air sealing and insulating, but I know you said that the basement should be addressed before doing any air sealing. Our side foundation walls are shared with neighboring buildings and don't show any signs of moisture. The basement is quite dry and has tall 11-foot ceilings with a walkout to our rear courtyard. The house is on a hillside, which makes me want to use the basement as some kind of livable space, either a workshop, playroom, storage, etc. The uphill foundation wall was under the sidewalk, and in our first year, we only had once have had visible water seep through the foundation wall after a long week of heavy rain. Even still, I worry about moisture, so I run a fan and dehumidifier to keep the humidity below 50%. What, if anything, should I do to address the stone foundation walls? I don't like the idea of covering them because I worry I'll just trap moisture with no place for water to escape. And the stone also looks cool. Any thoughts? Is there anything other than running fans, dehumidifiers that I should do to keep the basement dry? Once I tackle the basement, I'll start working on air sealing and insulating the upper floors. Thanks in advance, John. All right, Rubble Foundation, what do you say?
Well, I mean, the one key right there, one clue was I've only once seen liquid water coming into my basement.
That seems like enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. It's like if you know that there's any potential for water to be coming in at all, and you've got to worry, you've got to deal with it. And there's a couple of ways you can go. Like he says, he doesn't want to cover up the wall. If you did cover up the wall, we did an article in Fine Homebuilding probably 10 years ago of a office building and apartment in, I think it was Portland, Maine, where they did an elaborate, dimple mat and drainage system to completely cover the subgrade office space that they had that was in this old brick building. And so you kind of have two options. It's like you either do something really elaborate like that. Obviously, if he's worried about where the water is going to go, well, then you have at the bottom of the dimple mat a drainage system that goes to a sump pump if there is ever any water going to come into a system like that. But it's that's a big job. The other alternative would be to do the basement in not water sensitive materials. Maybe you choose a flooring system, whether it's brick floor or some sort of not wood-based floor, and you make it sort of a semi-finished space. But again, once you start air sealing and insulating upstairs, you'll probably know pretty quickly if you're by the humidity conditions in the basement whether there is moisture that you're not aware of coming in there.
Is that architect's named Emery, Rob, that we met in Brooklyn? Ingwe.
Ingwe, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Michael Ingwe pointed out that if you're living in a townhome with attached basements or shared walls, there's very little heat loss because it's conditioned on the other side. So like insulating these stone walls on the sides doesn't really get you anywhere anyway, right? On the front side, where there's soil, you're going to, especially any above grade parts, but he said it's below the sidewalk, so you're not going to insulate on the outside. And if you try to insulate on the inside, part of the survival of these masonry walls with lime-based mortars and fieldstone is that they need to be kept warm during the winter or they start to fall apart, right, Rob?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I think you're kind of stuck with what you got there. And I think, dehumidification is realistically the only way to go. And you can buy a lot of electricity for what it would cost to really treat the space like Rob described, where you're talking about dimple mats and finishes that are, moisture proof or waterproof, and, finishing the space. If you like the look of the fieldstone, I get it. It's cool looking. Why not live with it and, keep the space dehumidified? And you're probably going to want to, monitor your humidity very carefully when you start tightening up the upstairs, because, right now all the vapor that's coming through these masonry walls has a chance to dry as the stack effect, keeps it moving out of the house. If you tighten that up, it's going to accumulate potentially. And we've been hearing over and over again from people smarter than us that when you do this insulation and air sealing improvements, you better have a plan for your vapor as well. What do you think about this, Jeff?
Well, I think because they've got basically the side walls are shared walls, so they're not a problem. And then you've got what sounds like it should be an exposed wall in the back. So it's really that front wall sounds like it could be a nightmare.
Kylie, what do you think from a design perspective? Like, is it cool to have exposed fieldstone, or does that look like
that would be my preference?
A mess?
I don't think so, especially for a townhouse where, that's kind of the look. I'm sure the neighboring houses, well, I'm not sure, but I imagine they have it exposed. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah. Cause my guess is that, the time period of this building,
that's what they use.
As the basement wasn't living space, right? That was where your furnace or your boiler was. And, it was a basement. It was where you had pipes and cobwebs, not living space, right?
Yeah. If he did that partially conditioned space, I don't know what he said he wants to use it as kind of a workshop or something. If he did that, wouldn't it, I guess he'd still be dehumidifying, but it just sounds kind of cold and damp and not pleasant to be in.
Yeah, I think with the dehumidification, though, it's going to improve that. But you're right, it's like our friend who was spending time in New Zealand. When you have high humidity and low temperatures, it's way worse than if it's dry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. Anything further, folks, on this one?
What do you guys recommend for? I have a very wet basement, and I've been thinking about a dehumidifier. Do you have? How do you know when to size it? And I don't know. What can you tell me about a good manufacturer name for a dehumidifier?
I can tell you that if you truly have a wet space and my basement is pretty damp, and I've used a standard like medium size. Forget exactly what size it was, but like the typical one you could buy at your big box store, freestanding dehumidifier. And because my basement's so damp, those things run all the time, and I've pretty much killed 2 of them in the past 10 years because they're just overworked. Mm-hmm. So this is something I don't really know off the top of my head the answer to that question, but I think it's something we should maybe revisit and come back with the feedback next time.
Yeah, I'm going to buy one, but I want to know, I want some direction.
I would fall on the smaller than bigger sizing, Kylie, because your house is little, and these things are made to dry oftentimes much bigger spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And the way they size them is I think it's pints per day is how much water they wring out of the air. And I think the smallest one would be fine for you. And I haven't really found in a box store or on Amazon or what have you, my guess is that these things are all made by the same company in China, and they all have different brands on them. But the internals are all the same manufacturers, the compressor and the coils. So I think you're fine buying whatever you can get at your store. Mm-hmm. And like Rob, I'm on my second one after living here for 10 years because mine runs all the time, except in the winter. I don't run it in the winter time because the air is drier and the furnace is doing a lot of the work that the dehumidifier would be doing.
How often do you guys empty those pans? Is that a daily thing?
I've actually run mine into a drain in the basement because I wouldn't be able to keep up with emptying.
I could do that into the sump. I could do that into the sump. right? Or there's some.
Well, I mean, if you're dehumidifying, collecting the water, and then dumping back out into somewhere in the basement, it doesn't like seem like you're getting very far ahead, right?
It's not moving out. Yeah.
It's not getting out of the building,
Right.
and
Gotcha.
I don't know if that would. It depends on if your sump drains or if it's just going to sit in there, you know?
Sit in there because it's not enough force, right?
Yeah, or you know.
It's not.
And then you're spending energy to pump it outside.
Right.
It's a pain, you know. Like I'd like to not have to do that every day, but my sewer line going out to the septic system is too close to the floor joist that there's not enough space to put the dehumidifier and have it go into the pipe. It's too tall, so I have to use the bucket, which is a drag.
That's another job for Liam.
There you go.
I am going to put on his daily regimen. Yes.
Perfect.
This is from Kurt. He's from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Hi, Patrick and gang. I'm hoping you can help me with some ideas. I found what I believe is a production fault in my tile backsplash, which didn't show up until grouting. 550 tiles later, about 80 of them have a single crazing hairline crack. Crazing, I've learned, is caused primarily by temperature changes in the kiln caused by tensions in the glaze only. So crazing is what? It's just tiny crack, right?
But not in the tile itself.
This is in the glaze.
In the glaze.
My retailer is as dumbstruck as I am. Sometimes this is done as in handmade tiles for a certain look, but this is not the case with my tile. A pure plain white tile would not seek to have a single crack emanating in 1/6 of the tiles. Granted, the internet says that this could have been averted if I'd sealed the tile prior to grouting. Here we are now. No cleanser I've tried has worked. That's because the glazing is glass, right? It's you've melted glass and put a thin layer on the tile when you glaze it, right? No cleanser I've tried has worked. What am I to do? The leading option seems to be bash out the individual offenders, 80 of them. Is there a better way? Please help. So close to the finish line on this full kitchen remodel, yet so far.
This is in his own house, is he talking about?
Yeah.
Here? So here's the thing. Like,
did you guys look at the video for starters?
Such a drag.
I did, and I couldn't tell. I hadn't read the question prior to looking at the video, and I didn't know whether it was hairline cracks in the tiles themselves from like some kind of a shifting or temperature, or if it was in the glaze. But if it's in the glaze, honestly, you know what I would do is I would get some gloss white paint. I would wipe it on there, and I would wipe it off because if it's a hairline crack in the glaze itself. If you get a color matched paint and wipe it into those cracks and clean it off right away carefully without getting it under the grout, you're never going to see those cracks probably.
What are the chances of getting a good color match that you're not going to see it?
Well, they're like pure white. I mean, I don't know.
A lot of white.
I would certainly try that before I started chiseling tiles out of the wall.
I am so happy that I am not the half-assed repair guy on this one.
Would you take them out, Patrick?
I would totally break out the individual ones. And it's going to suck, but you know, what else are you going to do?
Or
just live with it. Just learn to embrace it and call it a design feature. And you tell your friends like, God, you love these crazed tile? Aren't they awesome? And the people are like, oh yeah, it's great. Those are custom.
I mean, if you look at the video, because he scans around the entire room and shows you that they're all over the place and they are kind of randomly placed. So, you know, it's shabby chic, right?
I don't think that's what he's going for. From what I read, it seems like he needs to get rid of them.
Yeah, if you're a perfectionist like Patrick, I guess chisel them out. But if you're willing to take a shot at making it look better than it does, I mean, honestly, I feel like you probably would. I've repaired tile glaze with like they even make epoxy color matched epoxy like that's specifically made for chips and tile. So you could maybe even use something like that. Would be a mess.
I think he needs to think about the labor of each of those projects.
I think he needs to use Flexicron.
I mean, if he goes Rob's route, is he going to be spending the same amount of time as he would be if he just removed the tile?
No way.
No.
way.
Like you take a painter's brush, you paint it into there. You take a
But
damp.
then what if it look good? Then he has to take them out anyway.
Well, yeah, but at least at that point, you're you haven't done a whole lot, and you're taking a shot at taking the easy route.
Here's another thing to consider, though, right? So anytime I've done a new construction process, the first one is really hard, right? And the second one is so much easier. Imagine how effortless this is going to be by the time you get to the 50th or 60th of breaking these things out. You're going to have the perfect plan of attack, and it's going to be a dialed-in process. So
maybe he's got a kid he can put to labor that he can employ.
So Patrick, have you ever chiseled out multiple individual tiles in the field of an installation like this?
The closest thing I have had to do to this, Rob, is when I was a young man, my neighbor hired me to repair the kind of mosaic tile floor that was in the half bath of this little home that was built in the 50s. And I'm guessing that the tile was original to the house. And he had a cast iron waistline fail, and they had to pull up some of the tile around the closet flange, and I put them back, and I pulled up the ones that were damaged and repaired them. So I've done a little of this work. I haven't done individual tiles in a larger field. I think that would be agony. But
yeah, and then he's already got it grouted, so then you have to match the grout, and that's just because we did a job like that once years ago when I was a carpenter, where the tile guy had installed these handmade tiles, and the customers were not comfortable with the lippage between some of the tiles. So we started chiseling them out individually. And then how
does that conversation start that they're not comfortable with the lippage?
All right. Honestly, the main reason was they were elderly and they were concerned about it being a tripping hazard, but they were also engineers. So their idea of lippage was like a 32nd of an inch. But yeah, we spent a couple of days chiseling them out individually, and we could not get them to look right. So we chiseled out 1,000 square feet of brand new handmade Italian tile.
Oh man.
Yeah.
How long did that take, Rob?
Oh, it was days and days. Yeah.
That sounds manly.
So let's go around the table here, and let's do this before we read the second part of his question. Okay. So, Jeff, what would you do about this problem?
I mean, I think Rob's idea is worth a shot because you're not going to lose anything if it works.
Right.
Kiley, what are you going to do?
I think I've been sold on that idea too.
Rob, are you sticking with your painting them?
I always take the path of least resistance.
You do not. That's a lie.
I wonder what Matt would do. Oh, Matt would take them out. We know that.
Matt would totally take them out just for fun. Even if there was nothing wrong with them, he would take them out.
He would probably take the whole backsplash out and start over.
Right.
That guy is a glutton for punishment. Oh my God. I don't know what I would do. I'm kind of tempted to try to paint a tiny crack, or I might just be inclined to embrace it as a design feature. I
can't do that. I don't think it looks very good.
It looks unintentional, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you get dimmer light bulbs for the kitchen, that might work too.
How good is your eyesight, right?
Kurt also asked at the end of his question, he's like, also, is there no recourse here? The internet says, I love when the internet says, the internet says, ISO, the International Standards Organization, ISO 10545-11, should ensure crazing testing or a disclaimer that the tile may craze, which Equip Tile did not do here. My retailer is being as supportive as is reasonable with a potential product cost refund, but I'm the one paying all the labor. Well, the cost is not the cost of the tile here is not the problem. It's the cost of the labor, right? This is going to take. I think it's reasonable to expect, at the minimum, it's going to take 15 or 20 minutes to dig each one of those out, right? And that's assuming it goes well. It could be a bigger pain than that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, because they're not even square tiles, they're like hexagonal or octagonal tiles. So like instead of 4 edges of tiles you're trying to break against, you're breaking against 6 or 8 tiles. So it's like you've got so much chance for damaging the adjacent tiles. And what would you do? Drill them out with a masonry bit in the middle and then chisel them from there towards the edges? Because if you work from the edges in, you're bound to damage something or mess up the grout.
I would ask Liam what he would do, because he would be the one doing it around here, at least this summer.
What's the substrate?
Right.
Yeah.
What did you say, Jeff?
What's the substrate? I mean, how are you going to get those off without
damaging that?
And
yeah, if it's over drywall, like if it's over cement board, you probably don't have to worry about it as much. But if it's over drywall, since it's not a wet location, which it wouldn't be unusual in a backsplash, then you might be tearing holes in your wall if you're trying to pull those tiles out.
Let's go to the ISO 10545-11. So this is why you buy tiles from like established, well-known companies, and you can ask your tile dealer, like, where is this tile coming from? You know, have you had any problems with this manufacturer? And this is a quality control problem that should have never happened, right? This shouldn't happen, or people should know there's a possibility this could happen, right? My most recent thought here is maybe you tear it all out and redo it. And honestly, that might be the easiest solution, right? Instead of, a backsplash is not a huge space. I mean, but I don't know what to say. You might actually save labor by doing it over again.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't thinking about. I mean, it all depends on how picky you are about the end result. And I wasn't thinking about the fact that if it was a manufacturing defect or if it's covered by the supplier that you're going to get your materials. Of course, like he says, labor. You've lost all your labor. But yeah, maybe if they would replace all the tiles, maybe I'd go that route. But on my own project, I'd still stick with the paint first.
I read something about it being what's called it's an inherent characteristic. So that means that it's not the fault of anybody. So you're not necessarily going to get your money back.
I mean, like some tile, has a crazed surface, and it's often beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. Art tiles really have this, and you've seen it on ceramics, I'm sure too, like pottery, mm-hmm. and it's cool, but like.
Not in
that case, you're expecting it. You want it. Like this mm-hmm. is not expected or wanted, and it's too random to be a design element, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just
didn't
really...
they have another room? Wasn't there a full bathroom with the same problem? I feel like it was more than the backsplash.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it seemed like a different room he was in, like a bathroom maybe.
Kurt from Toronto, Canada. I don't know, man. This is a tough one, and I don't think there's any good answer. I think you're going to have to try Rob's make it go away possibility, or just learn to love it.
That's a shame.
Or tear it all out.
Those are your options.
So, I wanted to remind everyone who's listening. See, guys?
Did you buy the lot of them?
No, I just don't wash my clothes anymore. I don't need to. A, I'm not getting dirty because I got a labor pool here, and B, I'm not going anywhere to smell bad. So
Well, people have been buying them. I was checking the Teespring store the other day, and there's definitely a bunch of new orders lately.
So how are we doing, Rob? How many podcast T-shirts have we sold? It's got to be at least 3 or 4.
Oh, more than that. I can't tell you the exact number off my top of my head, but it was.
I bought 5. So
I was going to say, did you get one of each, Patrick?
We've at least sold dozens of them. So
cool.
That's awesome to hear. So a listener should know that our building reopened on Monday of this week.
Did you go get stickers?
I have not gone into the building. They've asked to stay away until we really need to go in there to do something. And I think I told you guys, I don't know if Rob was on the show, but I've been tasked by Justin with developing a feature on sawhorses for or the next issue we're working on. And so I've had a bunch of sawhorses sent to the office so I can field test them. So when I go in to get those, I'm going to pick up the podcast stickers. And I'm begging all of the folks who have had letters read on the air or comments read on the air and you haven't got a podcast sticker to please send me a reminder with your mailing address, and I will get those out as soon as I possibly can. And if you've bought a t-shirt, send me a picture of you wearing it, and I will send you a sticker too.
Oh,
isn't that nice?
You're so generous with those stickers. There's a bunch on my desk if you need more.
I love to give away things I didn't pay for. That is the best thing in my life.
Did Rodney design that logo?
He did. It's really good, right? He's got a fantastic graphic design sense.
Mm-hmm. He's our art director.
What do you guys think? You got anything to add to the show?
Do I have anything to add?
You need a nap.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm not used to being up this early in the morning. You guys with your avoiding
it's freaking 10 o'clock.
I know. That's so closer to my bedtime.
We're night owls in our house.
Kylie's been up for 6 hours. Have you, Kiley? You get up around 4, right? You and Pontalillo.
Yeah, that's right. I often think of Brian. I'm like, Brian's the only other person I know awake.
You should call him. He's probably up.
I've texted him. He's usually meditating, though.
Actually, I was up a little earlier this morning, and I got my little reminder that we had to come and record the podcast. I was in the middle of adding more chapters to that drywall guide that I've been working on. So it's
briefly, Rob, can you tell us about that? So we've made some changes to the website to make it easier for folks to find information on certain subject areas. Can you talk about that a little?
So yeah, we've got something like 12,000 articles and videos on the website. So even with a good search, it's hard to find. Let's say you're doing a project, every single article on a particular topic quickly. So we're trying to we're in the process of reorganizing all of our core topics. We started with decking earlier this spring, and we're most of the way through drywall, and we're going to do painting next. And we'll be getting to insulation and air sealing, so we can talk about that in the podcast, right? Because it's relevant to the Fine Air Sealing podcast. So, we're going to work our way over the next year through all of our most important topics, and it's working because both the decking and drywall guides, since we launched them, have actually doubled the amount of traffic to the articles on our website. And I think that's because it's making it much easier for people who are trying to tackle a specific project to find exactly what they need in a very organized way. It's organized by chapters. So you start with the basics and the tools and materials, and you move on to the stages of construction of each of the types of projects.
That's so cool.
And it's one of the most exciting projects I've worked on because I know how much great stuff we have. And I think the best thing we can do is make it easier for people to find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to make an appeal to our listeners. If you guys like the show and you want to support the brand, increasingly it's difficult to be a media company in this day and age, right? When everyone is giving away stuff for free. The difference is that our stuff is curated and vetted. A lot of the information you find on the interweb is dubious at best. So if you like the brand and value what we do, please subscribe to the magazine, subscribe to the website. We don't make these appeals often, but I think the work we do is extremely important, and there's no better way to show that you value it than buying something from us. And I'll stop the public TV appeal at this point. But
no, that was very well said, Patrick.
It's the work we do. We need to do it, and the only way we can continue to do that is if we have your help. Whew. Anyone else?
Nice job.
Got a appeal or bone to pick?
I think it's time to end the show.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kiley, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thank you all very much for listening. It's always a pleasure to share my time with y'all. Please remember to send us your question and comments to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. Happy building. It's been a pleasure spending a morning with you. Thanks.